This edition of Monocle on Saturday was first broadcast on the 17th of January 2026. Hello there and a very warm welcome to Monocle on Saturday. It's Emma Nelson here, joined by journalist and founder of China Dialogue, Isabel Hilton. Isabel, a very good morning to you.
And a very good morning to you.
What have you spotted in the news?
Oh gosh, lots of things. We're all very dizzy, aren't we? 17 days into the new year. Big stories that continue to run include Gaza and Greenland, of course, and really quite a lot else going on.
And we have Mark Carney striking a trade deal in China as well.
That's a bit of a turnaround.
And we'll have the highlights of the 2026 London Art Fair, and Georgina Godwin will be joining us from Jaipur from the Literature Festival. That's all coming up on Monocle on Saturday. First, though, a look at the headlines. The White House has revealed the key members of the body that will supervise the next phase of the peace process in Gaza. The Board of Peace executives include his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and the former British Prime Minister, Tony Blair. Canada and China have struck an initial trade deal, with both nations promising to tear down trade barriers while forging new ties. The deal was reached during the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's visit to China, the first Canadian Prime Minister's visit to the country in 8 years. And the US President Donald Trump has offered to mediate a dispute between Egypt and Ethiopia over the Nile River. Ethiopia's opening of its Grand Renaissance Dam has been a source of anger in Cairo, which says the dam violates international treaties and could cause both droughts and flooding. And those are the headlines on Monocle Radio. So, very good morning to everybody. 2 minutes past 9 here in London. We're in the middle of January, Isabel Hilton, and we really have kind of lost our way already. As you said at the beginning of this programme, 17 days into 2026, and who knows where ourselves and the world is turning. How are you? Welcome.
I'm very well, thank you. Lots of coffee, holding hands with friends, that sort of thing.
There's an awful lot of coffee and holding hands, more so than possibly I think I've ever experienced, and I'm not entirely sure why. I think we're in that time at the moment when, a year into Donald Trump's first year, and actually stay tuned because the foreign desk later, Andrew Mueller will be looking at the first year of Donald Trump's second year. When you look at the news, you sort of open up a various website with one eye sort of half open, half closed, because we don't know where any of this is going at the moment. I mean, there are things moving on apace. So we have, for example, we have the second phase of the Gaza plan being, the board being announced here. We have Jared Kushner, we have Tony Blair on the list. That is one of those things that ordinarily would send the world into a tailspin. But actually, in that context at the moment, you just think, oh, well, at least someone's getting on with something. Which is not necessarily the right way to go about thinking for this.
No, I did hear someone this morning say, well, something's better than nothing. You think, well, possibly. But you're also right in that in any normal circumstances, that announcement, and indeed Gaza, would be subject to, serious scrutiny. It would be, top of the news list for some time. And right now, there is just so much going on, and the endless kind of hand grenades that are thrown into the global disorder by Donald Trump mean that we're constantly distracted, and nothing really gets looked at with the consistency that it demands.
So how's your week been? Because obviously your focus mainly China, isn't it? And China is sort of ploughing on it. I mean, its nimbleness and its ability to sort of capitalise on other people's uncertainty is absolutely dazzlingly good. But so what have you been working on this week?
Well, this week I've largely been working on the Greenland story. I mean, the Arctic is another big interest of mine. And of course, China's one of the bigger players in Greenland. And between disentangling the untruths that Trump has put out there, but also looking at what China actually has been doing, which is quite a lot, and looking at the response over time to the fact that China is now a big Arctic player. and trying to make sense of the US strategy. I was talking to a Greenlandic friend earlier in the week who said, I strongly advise not to seek logic in that position. You will go mad. And it's true. None of it makes sense.
It was quite nice that the Copenhagen Times this morning has quite a lot of coverage of what's happening, what the citizens of Greenland are actually thinking about. And there is this idea that actually this has been quite an amazingly positive galvanising exercise for the worst possible reasons. But the independence group in Greenland has been existing and noisy and making itself heard for quite a long time. And it has, drawn attention to the question of Greenland independence. And yet the moment that Donald Trump decides to sort of bank his pan in their direction, everyone says, gosh, isn't Denmark wonderful?
Yes, that might be slightly overstating it. I mean, essentially, everyone in Greenland wants at some point to be independent from the old colonial power. But you are absolutely right that faced with Donald Trump or the King of Denmark, they are voting very, very loudly for the King of Denmark. And in fact, there is a kind of Trump effect on elections, which is that voters tend to vote in the candidate that Donald Trump doesn't want. So in the elections in Greenland earlier this year, the very moderate, slow, cautious approach to independent won over the independent now faction. And that's a fairly consistent Trump effect. But one of the things that another Greenlander said to me this week is, the Americans talk very loudly about their own patriotism, particularly the MAGA crowd. They don't seem to recognise that other people feel patriotic too. They feel very strongly, particularly in Greenland, about their own identity and their own way of life. They don't feel hard done by. They have free healthcare. They have free dental care, something that most people in America don't have. And they feel that they have something to defend. They do not see the United States, and certainly Donald Trump and his faction, as a promising future for Greenland.
It's the article in the Copenhagen Post that I was referring to a moment ago. It says it took Trump's threats of Denmark to start taking Greenland seriously, say the voices of the minority pro-independence supporters. The pro-independence voice has not gone away. It has seen the and in this context, you could see Donald Trump eyeing the prize of Greenland as that moment when the pro-independence movement could really say, well, it is now time that everybody, not just ourselves and the minority, and not just Donald Trump, should start to look at Greenland a little bit more seriously in terms of not only, as you say, the nature of the space itself, the place itself, but also where it sits globally. Because for a comparatively small number of people in a geographically quite small space, the influence is profound, isn't it? As you said, China wants a stake in it, America wants a stake in it, Europe wants to keep it.
Yeah, and the Greenland, the independence movement in Greenland, which has a lot of support. The argument is about the pace and what and the end result. It's not. There is a fairly consistent desire to move beyond the colonial past, and Denmark wasn't a particularly benign colonial power. As few of the indigenous peoples in the Arctic had a good colonial experience. The question that the Greenlanders, who are not, they're not country bumpkins, they're sophisticated, and they have a very sophisticated understanding of their position. And the question they're asking themselves now is, what relationship could we possibly have with the United States that would be better? And there isn't an answer. You look at Puerto Rico, which, is essentially a colony where there are no voting rights whatsoever, and very few social benefits. What has Greenland got to gain from a closer alignment with the United States? It would lose its protection from Denmark. It has been, the government of Greenland has been inviting investment into Greenland's minerals for 30 years, particularly from North America. The current Prime Minister was there last year saying, please come and invest in our mines. It's not that Greenland has screened out any American interest. It's just that there hasn't been any. And again, the United States, Trump says, the Europeans can't defend Greenland. The Europeans have been much more consistent about the defense of Greenland than the United States has. And the United States States over the past 30 years has steadily reduced its military presence there, but it is entirely open to them to put it back again. So there is no logic in this position. And the Greenlanders are very, very fed up of being talked about on social media, with Americans making jokes, as one of them put to me, about seizing our home. It is just extraordinary.
It is absolutely extraordinary. Yet what we've seen in the last few weeks have been extraordinary. In the last few weeks and months, dare we say, it was extraordinary moves by the United States, effectively to get involved in every aspect of international problems, given the fact that, let's look at what happened in Venezuela a couple of weeks ago, when you have, this time 2 weeks ago, Nicolas Maduro was being hoiked out of his residence and taken over to New York. That has now left this gap, which is being filled by various sort of president. We have Delcy Rodriguez, but we also have the American oil companies going in now, and then we look at what's happening in Gaza. Let's talk about that. We mentioned it briefly about the U.S. Secretary of State and Marco Rubio and the former British PM Tony Blair creating this board of peace. This again is international bodies, non-locals going in and reorganising.
The Greenlanders have this expression, nothing about us without us. And I think if you look at the Trump approach across the world, it absolutely ignores the desires and wishes and interests of the people on the ground. That's not a good idea, because in the end, people will assert their wills, interests and desires. I think, frankly, Venezuela could end up in a very, very messy situation. There are a lot of armed actors on that Colombian border, and the Americans are a very, very easy target for those people. In Gaza, you have this board of high-level. You have a mixture of some international worthies. You have Tony Blair and you have people close to Trump. But what's the executive agency? Who is actually going to deliver the food that people in Gaza still need? Who is actually going to stop the Israelis still conducting attacks on Gaza, which they continue to do despite the ceasefire? Who is going to put together the coalition of people who get those desperate war victims housed again, get them under cover, get them back with some kind of economic underpinning to their lives? I don't really see this body, which again seems to be operating at a largely symbolic level so far. I think they have a very long way to go.
We do. They have Bulgarian politicians and a former UN envoy to the Middle East as high representatives for Gaza, trying to enact things. In the absence, though, of does any of this help? However, and you have to ask that if someone is of experience, and regardless of the difficult nature of Tony Blair and his past and his previous associations, especially with the Iraq War, those problems can never be removed. They are just part of the Tony Blair story and the Middle East story. But the fact that you do have someone who some people have suggested has good intentions, has good faith in what he does, does that actually contribute anything positive to trying to sort out the Gaza problem?
Well, look, I think it's certainly preferable to having rank amateurs. I think Pete Hegseth running the American military is an example of what you don't want. But you have an absolutely, you have layer upon layer upon layer of conflicting interests in this situation. You have a 2,000-year-old quarrel. You have the interests of the Gulf states. You have the Iranian situation going on. And you have an extremely obdurate government in Israel. Netanyahu said that he thinks Phase 2 is largely symbolic. Well, no, Phase 2 is actually
that's the tough part.
Where we need to get to. That's what we need to get through. That's the disarmament of Hamas. That's, the restoration of some life and dignity to the people of Gaza. And, the situation that continues apace, which is the assaults on Palestinian farmers and inhabitants in the West Bank, which, just seems to be going on, again, without any attention really being paid to it. So we have a situation that I guess what I wait to see is how this high-level group is going to get actual traction with the realities on the ground, because it's the realities on the ground, as we saw in, when this whole thing kicked off. That's what drives the wider politics.
Isabel, let's touch on Mark Carney in Beijing. A trade deal has been struck.
Indeed it has.
Opening up or reducing barriers on tariffs on the likes of electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Before he went, everybody looked at Mark Carney, knowing probably why he was doing it, but wondering what the outcome would be. Because Carney is no fool, and Carney in the past has said that China is a threat. Yet this smiling ability to get business done quickly is a sign of what?
Well, what he said about it, we have to deal with the world as it is, not as we would like it to be. But it is a big turnaround for Canada. Canada has had among the more toxic sets of relationships with China over the past 10 years. Particularly because of the arrest of Meng Wanzhou, who was the daughter of the Huawei founder, at the request of the United States, an Interpol warrant which was executed in Canada, where she had a couple of houses and spent time. The retaliation for that was the arrest of the detention of two Canadian citizens in Canada, both called Michael, as it happened. And their detention in horrible conditions until a deal was reached. And that, was a very, very resonant episode. And Mark Carney was pretty much China hawk during his electoral campaign. However, having to deal with Donald Trump, your closest neighbour, has probably introduced a new element into Mark Carney's strategic calculations. Canada was faced with very high tariffs and trade barriers with its biggest trade partner. Canada had introduced tariffs on electric vehicles partly to protect the Canadian motor industry, but also, because like the rest of the OECD, it's facing the conundrum of what you do about China's industrial economy, which seems to operate for very different rules from everybody else's and is essentially destroying industrial economies across the world. So that was a real Canadian issue. But reality is that you can't fight too many wars on too many fronts all at the same time. And so calming down the situation with China has clearly been the purpose of this trip, and it seems to have had some success.
Isabel Hilton, international journalist and founder of China Dialogue. Isabel, stay with us because we're going to turn our attention now to the London Art Fair, one of the UK's key fixtures in contemporary art. Joining me now on the line is the director of the fair, Sally Bent. Good morning, Sally. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well, thank you.
We're very... Sorry, say... I was about to say...
Slightly frantic.
Well, look, we won't keep you too long because you have the small matter of the London Art Fair to kick off. On when is it? Is it happening on Tuesday?
Yeah, so we're building. We're already sort of setting up the fair, and it opens with our VIP preview on Tuesday and then runs throughout the week until Sunday at the Business Design Centre in Angel.
So tell us about it.
Well, London Art Fair has been established for 38 years now, so it has a real, longevity and a sort of a long-standing trusted voice in the art market. Our primary focus is around modern British and contemporary galleries, and it just offers an opportunity to foreground that work at the beginning of the sort of the art year. We always say it kicks off the art year and gives people a really wonderful opportunity to sort of reconnect with their clients and get those conversations going for 2026.
And what are the conversations, or what are we expecting those conversations to be about this year?
I think as you sort of, so often around the art market, it has a real narrative of boom or bust. But I think if you look ahead to 2026, I think we're really looking at a year of recalibration, and one where the confidence in the art market is really grounded around quality, care, and the sort of long-term thinking. Speaking to the conversation you were just having, in an increasingly sort of fast-paced and uncertain global context, collectors are really gravitating towards trusted voices, expertise and human connection. And London Art Fair, we're so proud that we've been running for 38 years, and it does offer a sort of very stable light in that art market, and somewhere where you can have real confidence in, the galleries that you're meeting and the sort of views that you're taking on the work you see.
So tell us a little bit more about about some of the highlights that we got, because your partner this year is the National Trust.
Yeah, so for 10 years we've had actually I think it's the 11th year this year, a museum partner at the fair. And we're so delighted this year to be working with the National Trust, who from their vast array of properties have chosen to focus on the collections from two of their modernist masterpieces, which is 2 Willow Road, based in Hampstead, and the Homewood.
The 2 Willow Road was the home of Ernest Goldfinger, is that correct?
Yeah, so both homes were designed and built by the people who lived in them. So Ernest Goldfinger in the case of Willow Road, and Patrick Gwynne for the Homewood in Surrey. And they sort of designed, these modern masterpieces, which sort of increasingly also became homes for their collections as well as their families over the time that they lived there. And it's the first time that the National Trust has presented like an exhibition of this scale of their modernist works outside the homes. So it's a really wonderful opportunity to come and see the works. And, there's artists such as Henry Moore, Rita Kern-Larston, Max Ernst and Prunella Clough. And they're also, I think, really excited to see it come to fruition, because they're presenting it in a way where you feel like you're sort of stepping into the homes as well. So alongside the works, they're bringing items of furniture and sort of, incidentals from the home to give you a real sense of what the sort of environment of those properties are.
Because that's the interesting part of art, isn't it? That in order for it to sort of function fully, it needs to be placed within what is often a domestic context. Galleries only go so far, but to actually see how the piece operates within, the four walls upon which it often hangs, is a really, really important part of the art itself, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, you so often find people thinking along those lines when they look at a piece of art, thinking, will it go with my sofa? Or, will it sort of fit within the like emotional context of my home? Because you want work that feels part of sort of your everyday life and complements it, rather than something which sort of jars with it. And I think it's often, the challenge of sort of presenting art to get that emotional connection to people so they can imagine it within their own homes and their own lives.
Isabel, let's bring you into this one. I mean, see, the London Art Fair in Islington this week. Will you be going along? Do you have time?
I feel rather guilty that actually it's in my neighbourhood.
Exactly, that's why I'm asking you.
In the 38 years of the London Art Fair, I have never been. So I think I have. I think as a result of listening to this, I will make a point this year of attending the art fair. I mean, it's an interesting event. I'm curious as to, if the general public is really the audience for this, or is it about galleries getting together? Is it about professionals talking to professionals? Is it about finding ways to tempt the big collectors into new territory? I'm always interested in the kind of underlying dynamics of events like this.
Sally?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we're really proud of about London Art Fair is that we always say it's a welcoming environment, whether, you're a first-time buyer or a seasoned collector. We offer, a breadth of work from household names to emerging voices, and also, a breadth of price points. And I think for the general public, I think sort of that first time you step into a gallery space can be quite an intimidating moment. There's no prices on the walls. You're not really sure what it is. And an art fair offers like a much more sort of welcoming, sort of gateway into that world where you don't feel sort of, rather than stepping into a gallery on your own, you don't feel like you're under such a microscope.
So you feel you have a right to be there, as it were, rather than a sense that your wallet isn't big enough to buy you a ticket.
Exactly. Someone's not going to sort of ask you how much money you have to buy one.
I think I'm quite up for joining the art gang of North London. It sounds quite good fun. Now, we're not just focusing on London, are we? There's also the new emerging and international names.
Yeah, definitely. So, in particular, in our encounters section, that is a subsidized area of the fair, which is focused around emerging galleries and emerging artists. And we increasingly find that that's where we find our most international artists, in our international galleries as well. Sorry. So we have people joining us from Mexico, Japan, Hong Kong, Portugal, and Greece, and also a collective of Ukrainian artists based in London under the title Identity. And it just offers like a sort of much more affordable, platform for these galleries to present on the London scene. And London, despite the sort of economic and geopolitical pressures, is still a key place in the art world. It is still a key player in the art market.
Sally Bent, Director of the London Art Fair, beginning on the 20th of January. Thank you so much for joining us on Monocle on Saturday. Still with me, Isabel Hilton, but we have to hear from Jaipur now. Georgina Godwin is on the line, on her travels once again. Good afternoon, Georgina. How are you?
Really lovely to talk to you, and thank you so much for keeping the seat warm.
It's a pleasure. What are you up to?
So I'm here at the Jaipur Literature Festival, which is billed as the greatest literature show on earth. And honestly, it is. I think they get something like 350,000 people through the gate. And the demographic here is much younger than you would find in Western literature festivals. They're very engaged. They buy books, and the atmosphere is incredibly festive. Of course, as Isabel knows, I think she's been here, there's lots of fabulous parties in all these palaces every night. And the thing that's really struck me is the quality of the debate, and things that in the West we just don't touch at all. I found myself standing looking confused a minute ago, and somebody said, "What's the problem?" And I said, "Well, I'm trying to decide between Gaza genocide and AI." And they said, "Well, that's pretty much the zeitgeist." But I just thought that it was extraordinary that they could program something with that title, Gaza Genocide, when you look at what's been happening at festivals around the world. Adelaide Festival just had to cancel because a Palestinian author was uninvited, and the whole 185 writers pulled out. The whole festival collapsed. And yet here they realized that in order for us to sort of move forward as a civilization, you need to sit and debate these things in a polite kind of way. And I'm just so pleased to see sessions like that taking place, and actually to look at many of these topical issues through an Eastern or an Asian lens. I think it's really important to see the world from a different perspective.
Yes, indeed. I mean, Isabel, we'll bring you in on this one. It is too easy to see things through a Western lens, isn't it, often?
Absolutely. And I have to say, Georgina, I am so jealous that you are in Jaipur. I have wonderful memories. It's many years since I was at Jaipur. It was much smaller, but it's still completely fabulous, partly because there's those amazing buildings, those palaces that had been commandeered for the festival. But you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the things that has been very striking, really, since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, is that the Western perspective is becoming a minority perspective now. That India in particular, actually, I found talking to Indian friends and contacts about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, you got a very strong pushback on the idea that this was necessarily a bad thing, and Russian imperialism. So it's quite sobering to encounter very perspectives shaped by a very different history, clearly, but also that represent the reality of the world we're living in. We do need, and I'm sure that events like Jaipur facilitate this, we do need much broader conversations, and we need to admit many more perspectives into the debate.
So, Gigi, what ideas and perspectives have surprised you?
I think I've just been very, very encouraged by how outward-looking people here are, whereas I think in the West we do tend to be a little bit insular. And I'm looking forward particularly to two conversations I'm going to have tomorrow, one with Leo Varadkar, who's the ex-Taoiseach of Ireland, who's here. And then after that, I'll be speaking to Tim Berners-Lee, who, of course, invented the World Wide Web. These are sort of people who are drawing huge crowds because the mostly local audience are desperate to know about all of this stuff. And I find it so refreshing.
It's an interesting thing that you mentioned that, you said that, the world is looking at things in a different way and the Western view is different. Are those two names, Leo Varadkar and Tim Berners-Lee, sort of embody Western culture and civilization in so many ways?
They absolutely do, although, of course, Leo is ethnically Indian, which is really interesting. And I intend to ask him why he actually never made an official visit when he was Taoiseach to India. And I wonder if there was some kind of problem around his sexuality. He's gay, whether perhaps there wasn't an invitation issued. I have no idea, but I think that'll be an interesting place to go to. And, of course, Tim Berners-Lee, well, the clue's in the name, the World Wide Web. And everybody in every country in the world has got a little investment in him.
Right. We've talked about debate. The other thing you mentioned was parties. Off you go.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, fabulous. I mean, a big black tie event tonight. There have been sort of all sorts of things in palaces and there's balls and all sorts of things. But actually, Emma, I have to tell you, it's the shopping. Right. So much shopping.
Okay.
So beautiful. The jewels, the frocks, the pashminas, the cashmere. I'm getting something made. I ordered it today. It'll be delivered to my hotel tomorrow. A silk jacket.
Goodness me.
So, about £2.50. So.
Well, I'll send my measurements and you can bring me a job lot back. I'll be absolutely up for that one. Now, speaking about packing, the last time, or one of the previous adventures that you went upon, you said nailed it. You'd got everything in specific bags pertaining to specific days and specific events. Has that pattern been adhered to?
Totally. The answer to everything is packing cubes. Just get a load of packing cubes and then you just do it by day, because it's really easy when I've got to do 2 on-stage interviews, then I've got to do a press event, and then I've got to go to a party. So there you've got your packing cube and it says Friday. And it's just so easy when you're in and out of hotels and traveling a lot, and there it all is. And you have a little list so you know what jewelry goes with what. And I have to tell you, I'm such a nerd about this. I have a spreadsheet so that I don't repeat outfits at the same festival. So I can look at what I wore in Jaipur last year and make sure that I'm not wearing the same. So I'm so embarrassed. I am embarrassed, okay.
You've just said it on the radio. Don't worry. No, it doesn't matter anymore. But we've got 2 sets of drawers which are literally on the floor. Isabel, does your mind operate like a packing cube system?
I think I need to take lessons here. I mean, I completely sympathise with the idea that if you organise things that way, you remove the stress of having to make decisions in the morning, which, as we know, is always difficult. But I tend to acknowledge that my way of dealing with that set of decisions about what I'm going to wear that day is to wear the same thing.
Brilliant.
Clearly not at all what Georgina does.
I think that's called a code. You can actually turn that into a thing. You could actually make it your trademark instead of actually bothering to wash your clothes. Just call it a code.
Just wear black, like whatever.
Believe me, the number of white T-shirts that go on travels with me, it's literally 2 pairs of trousers and 1,000 white T-shirts, and the rest, well, we'll make it up when we get there. Georgina, are you going to be able to fit this beautiful jacket into a packing cube? Because my heart is slightly breaking. Someone at this precise moment is stitching something with love, and it has to be squished into a case.
I know, but it's silk. It won't take up no space at all.
Okay, I'm sending you measurements. I'll have one too, please. And I suspect that Isabel wants one as well.
Well, I'm certainly. You have raised expectations for the next time we see you in the studio, Georgina.
Whereas I think there's a couple of us here scrabbling to keep up. Georgina, thank you so much for joining us. We'll let you get on with your supremely busy day. We wish you the happiest of times in Jaipur. And that's all the time we have for Monocle on Saturday. The warmest of thanks to all my guests, Isabel, Hilton, Sally Bent and Georgina Godwin. Thanks also to the producer and studio engineer, Mariella Bevan. Monocle on Saturday is back next week. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening. And if you're travelling, get your packing cubes. Goodbye.